Then, yeah, thank you everyone for being here, and thanks already to the lovely presentations we heard. So yeah, I'm gonna present the work Talavera de Luz, Renovación de nuestra Herencia, which translates to Talavera of Light, Renovation of Our Heritage. The work was done by, or initiated and conceptualized by Dr. Miguel Ángel Pérez Cuautle, who is also in the chat, I guess, and me. So Miguel is a sociologist or urbanist and researcher from Puebla in Mexico, and in Berlin. And yeah, the work is interdisciplinary and intercultural collaborative art that try to combine traditional craft of Talavera with contemporary media art. So the work was realized in Puebla in Mexico this year in so this year in April to May. However, we started the work already in 2021 when Miguel, from an urbanist perspective, because he worked in Puebla, especially with vulnerable neighborhoods. So he was asking me if I would be interested in a collaboration about work in public space in vulnerable neighborhoods there to also increase the cultural life there and also to shed more light and attention on these neighborhoods. Because in Puebla, what happens, especially in the cultural center, and Puebla is one of the oldest colonial cities in Mexico or in actually Latin America. And it has like a historical center of which half is very touristic and gets lots of funding for restoration and anything. But the other center, or the other part of the center, which is more for marginalized groups, former indigenous groups, um, has much less attention and therefore also way less financial means. So yeah, I will talk a bit about the background. So Talavera is a traditional ceramics with a history of approximately 5 centuries, which you can see here. Is the mouse? Oh yeah, perfect. Like this is Talavera also here. This is like just a picture of Puebla. Um, so it is actually inspired by the Spanish Baroque. So with the colonialization of the Spanish people, they brought the Spanish Baroque to Puebla, where it mixed with indigenous techniques, which you can see also in the motifs, but also especially working with the ladrillos, which is the bricks, which they also used to take from the pyramids there, also as a cultural symbol of superiority by the colonizers. So there is a lot of history, and even the Spanish Baroque itself came from the colonization of the Arab world in Spain for approximately 800 years, where a lot of the mosaicos came actually to Spain, but also it has a lot of influence from France and Italy, and also a lot of influence even from China, going back to the Chinese traditional ceramics, which were blue and white, which came also around, I believe 500 years, 600 years ago to Europe, and also introduced partly the blue and white Talavera aesthetic or mosaic aesthetic, which we also saw already today in a different presentation. So yeah, going from this also, yeah, it's nowadays. I mean, this is really specific to the city, and also it's a state of Puebla. It's a state of Mexico. Um, and yeah, it's also protected since 1997 by Mexican government, even by sound and by material and everything, like to be original Talavera. And also since 2019, it's part of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. So actually, it's a medium which carries a lot of globalization and also colonialization. And so that was for us very interesting to work with. Here you see like a few different pictures of the city. But then what happens, especially in the poorer neighborhoods, there are ruins of former colonial buildings, which will not be restored because no one in these neighborhoods has actual interest or money to restore them. So they will just fall apart. Sometimes you can find abandoned buildings which are abandoned for over more than 100 years with growing trees out of them, which are sometimes used as a shelter by homeless people, but are mostly really abandoned. And so was the community center, the Sebes Community Center. This is an old picture, I believe, like somewhere in the 60s. Couldn't find the exact date. So this is a former colonial country house from the 18th century, which also used to be inhabited by a bishop first, and then later by some German, because there was also Humboldt around there, and he had like a school there. So the directors of the German school were in this house, and then later it became more abandoned, especially in the 20th century. Was for several decades abandoned, and it got like very like teared down. Here you can see like this wall, there was a big mural on it. It's lost. Here's everywhere, like down there, Talavera, which are mostly stolen. What happened, like many criminal groups break in, and partly even like people like ordered from Europeans stealing like the decorations and then selling them in Spain, for example. Yeah, so our idea was to make kind of a digital or metaphorical restoration of these buildings, together with the community of the Sebes, and yeah, to also make like a metaphorical reclaim and also a redesign with the people instead of having like a design put onto them. So yeah, we teamed up with the Benemérita Autónoma Universidad de Puebla, which is the main university of over there. And we had also the kind support of Professor Obed Mesa Romero, who is a designer. So we had like a first workshop in the BWAP with the design students, where we did like in the first day, it was a 2-day workshop. Professor Obed introduced the more contemporary approach to design tiles and mosaicos. And in the second part, so the students were to draw them. And in the second part, I gave a brief introduction on P5. So yeah, I chose to try to do everything which was possible with open source, because it's also technological as like a kind of power imbalance. I try to even it out as much as possible. And for P5, I think is very nice since it also works as a web browser application. So even, I mean, in this university, everyone has like good laptop. It was not a problem. But for the second workshop, it was nice because people can even just use it on their phone and try coding there. So, but since the workshop was rather short, it was just enough to give them more like an introduction of what creative coding is, how code can be used creatively for also visuals in this sense, because most of these students never had like any contact with coding before. Yeah, so the idea then was to digitalize their designs and put them into animations. And then the second workshop we did directly at the community center. And there we invited one Talavera, like a small company who we collaborated with. We invited like some craftsmen from there to give the first part of the workshop. However, this was only one workshop, 1 day of workshop. So in this workshop, the participants did their own actual traditional Talavera. However, we had to start already with this phase in between here, because usually it's a process which takes like several weeks until you form the clay. You have to dry it, and much more complex than I thought before. So it was also a very kind of tight time schedule we had and a very limited budget. So the craftsman came already with this what you see here, the white status. So the participants could like draw or paint their own designs, and then we would later burn them or let them be burned by the craftsman into the finished product. And yeah, here you can see also. Then we went to the exhibition, which was kind of split into two parts. The first part was technically very difficult because like it was the first day in the month that it rained and it was everything outside, so we had like a lot of technical problems. So we had like kind of to compromise a lot of the aesthetics of the projections. So here you can see it's like kind of split in half. It's not actually put together, but it was yeah, it is what it is. So but the participants still really enjoyed to see their designs. Like even some of them, I mean, they would receive them also there. Some of them would fit them into the missing spots of the building. Other people would just like try to find their own designs in the projections, which was nice to see. And then we still decided to do it a few days later with like a good weather and better timing, because also we could not leave any equipment at site because it's still like also a bit like a dangerous neighborhood, so you cannot leave like expensive equipment there. So we came like a few days later to actually set up the whole thing as we planned initially. So there it's actually two projectors forming one big projection. They were running on Raspberry Pis. The projection, in P5. For the projection mapping, I also used like an open source library directly in P5, and everything would run into like a Chromium browser. Was also sometimes a bit painful, but to get it to work. But at the end, it worked. And here you can also see like we also projected on some of the pillars here, which some of them even missed some of the original Talaveras, which we filled up with the digital ones, and they would be also animated. Maybe I can show it. There is also a website. There's a documentation. And I also integrated the code here. It's basically working like a cellular automata. Since it's P5, it can also run in the browser, which is quite handy. It's basically working like cellular automata. So I got inspired by, or I collected quite a lot of different patterns I would find in the city, and would try to abstract them into codes. And then each tile I photographed from the participants had like kind of its own DNA with a like matching with a one pattern. And then they would grow from different spots. They grow into another, and kind of creating this non-dynamic mosaic, which is rooted on the traditional patterns, but in this sense being creating more variation, I think, in a sense. This just for that. Okay. So and here's also another picture. I'm not sure if it's too dark to actually see, but so we also had like quite, because of the very limited budget, we used mostly like projectors we got from the university, like more like presentation projectors. We used also like a projector from Miguel's father, which was like probably 15 years old. We used a projector which had like a VGA, so we had to get like even adapter. It was like really everything super low budget, but I think it was also nice to because usually the projection mappings is super expensive, like the commercial projection mapping. Also, and it was interesting, but in Puebla they do a lot of commercial projection mapping sometimes, or in Mexico generally. Sometimes they do it on like big pyramids. Like even when I was there was something for the because there was like Semana Santa, like the Easter, which is very important there, and they had like also big projections. But usually like this costs, I don't know, 50,000, 100,000, I don't know, very expensive equipment, very expensive production. So it was nice to try to also replicate something like this with a very limited means and show it's also possible to do something with that. Yeah, so then yeah, I go to the discussion and the historical and cultural context. So yeah, we asked ourselves, of course, after if it's possible to reinterpret Talavera by algorithms and digitally. And I think it was interesting because the Talavera itself is also like an algorithm already, but through the digitalization, it loses certain qualities. Like it loses, of course, the haptic, the small imperfection in each copy, but at the same time, it also gains a lot more like variability. And I think it's kind of a logical, to me at least, logical continuation of mosaic art to do it in an even more sophisticated algorithmic way, and still having the connection to the actual handcraft. Also, the idea of the cellular logics was that the animations also speak about the culture itself, since it was like such a big globalized practice already inherent into the Talavera. The idea was to portray it as like a non-dynamic system where every tile of the participants also changes the overall pattern, due to that every tile has its own DNA in the code and everything changes everything kind of. And I think it was interesting metaphor for the whole emergence of this this cultural artifact. And yeah, going on to the social impact. Another thing is also what I think is interesting in doing it digitally, because you can kind of like generate as many tiles as you want, because also there, like the Talavera is a symbol of wealth. Like sometimes you would see there's like a wall with Talavera, but maybe one is fallen out and they replace it with a different one. It doesn't matter if it doesn't fit aesthetically, maybe it has different colors even, but it's like a symbol of wealth. Especially sometimes you see buildings which are more like the bricks, than some have more Talavera. The more Talavera it has, the more rich was the person. So I think it was also interesting to have like this infinite replication of it without needing to pay more than one design, actually, if you want to do it the very minimalist way. Yeah, and also since we did every open source, everything, and open archive, the idea was also to get access to the people. Also, there was some make it accessible to the people. There was also some feedback from participants who didn't have contact before with creative coding, but they seemed really interesting. So that was also really nice for us to see that, because of course it was like a 1 or 2 day intervention. You won't change like anything much. It's more like a metaphorical or symbolic thing. But still, like it seemed like 2 or 3 people actually got like further interest in it. So it was nice also to share with them further resources. And yeah, generally that yeah, to share the high technology and also the access to contemporary art, which also oftentimes is a bit like kept in a more intellectual field. And then the future perspectives, yeah, I mean, we see this as like a first iteration, so we'd really like to do like another iteration, maybe in Puebla again, maybe also in other cultural contexts, since the theme of mosaics like kind of spreads all over the world, and you can find aspects of it kind of in a lot of different cultures. So we would also like to kind of cultivate like a living archive where each iteration can like draw on material from other iterations, and that all participants can also reconnect if they want to. And yeah, another thing is also we want to do more extended workshops, because this time I did the big part of the coding myself, and also of course the aesthetic decisions which come with it. But of course it would be nicer to even develop together with the people also the logics of the digital system. But for that you need definitely more time, especially if you work with people who never really had a contact with coding. So yeah, in conclusion, yeah, we hope that we maybe inspired some people to have some maybe try some technological or some creative coding themselves, or just have an idea of what it is, or contemporary art generally. And also we hope to give the people a bit of like yeah, like empowerment to also design their own environments. I was told that after the, I mean, my friend Miguel, who I worked with, he lives still. I mean, he lives in Puebla, so he's present there. He told me that in the community center they now want to install a permanent projector because they really liked it, and they're thinking about renovating the space anyway, and to try out like different visualizations of how it could like. So it's really nice for me to hear that it maybe even has an impact beyond the exhibition and the workshop. And yeah, so that's basically it. Special thanks, yeah, to everyone involved, from the CEBIS, Miguel's Vater for hosting me, the Obed Mesa Romero professor, Donachi Tejeda, which was very helpful at the BUAP to help up with projectors, the Talavera artisans, the University of the Arts, the BUAP, all the participants, and the DAD. And yeah, if you're interested in any more information, there's the website. There's of course the paper. The code is on GitHub and still needs a bit more documentation, but it's technically there. And yeah, thank you very much.
Lovely stuff. We are behind time, but we could try and fit in one question if there's one in Berlin or online. Otherwise, we can. Does anyone feel a question coming?
We've got a question, yeah. Thank you for the presentation and for your endeavors. I was wondering, did you add some sound to it, some sonification, since that's your main thing?
Yeah. Yet not. We were actually at this time we were planning to. We also did like a lot of recordings from, because a lot of street musicians. Our idea was also to do like kind of a mosaico of like street musician artifacts. But actually, due to time restraints, it was not possible. But for future iterations, I would definitely like to add sound. Yeah.
All right. Second question. First, I really want to say that I appreciate the effort. I think it's important that people take back their, re-ownership of their spaces, and it helps make a society more safe and included. So well done. The second question I wanted to ask you is about inevitability of the new means. So you have explored this by turning something that's inherently historical and heritage based into lasers and code and stuff. So is this truly inevitable? Would you do, or would you consider for the future a combination of means, or how do you plan to integrate this so that it's not ignorant on a way or superimposed on the other way to people who don't know how to work with stuff?
You mean now with the barrier of like technology?
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, I mean the idea also what we did now is like also to provide first like the workshops with the traditional crafts, so that also people can reconnect even with their own cultural heritages, because also many people maybe even live there, they don't know how it works with the Talavera in detail, and very interesting for many. And then we have the offer just for the cultural or for the technology part. There was also participants who are maybe already of also a bit older age, and they maybe not even interested in the code, or maybe some interested, but they just listen a bit. So that was perfectly fine. So I think for future iterations, we think also to have the offer. You can do either or both. It's not necessary, but still the idea, or how I imagine it, let's say if it's like a 3 to 5 day workshop, it's rather to give the participants a few like hands-on, very easy P5 experiments to have a feeling of what code can do, and then more like speak about it conceptually, and then probably I be the one who implemented like in detail. But I think it's more important to have the conceptual understanding. Oh, okay, let's do something. If here appears something, here appears something else, or what kind of rules we want. And the actual implementation, I think, would be still the smartest that I do it, or if other people in the group are also experienced with coding, of course, can be shared. But that would be this is at the moment my plan of like continuing the technical part. And yeah, and then keeping it open source and public everything. And yeah, and also to provide like, and I think P5 also has a great community to actually learn even on yourself, or find people even online to learn with, for people who really want to dig deeper into it. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Cool. So yeah, another round of applause. Thank you very much, Roberto.